I say we're live.
We're not yet, Matt.
It says we're streaming live.
We are. We're live now.
We're live.
YouTube would never lie to me.
YouTube would never lie to you. You're live.
Matt, you look alive to me, so I think that we're live.
Welcome everyone to episode 10 of HR Leaders Live, the show where we discuss the future of work with today's most innovative and successful people leaders. My name is Chris Rainey, co-founder of HRD Leaders and host of the HR Leaders podcast. On today's show, we're going to be talking about how can job seekers really stand out during their job search. We're also going to be looking at what realistic steps people can take to relieve work-related stress. And we're also going to touch upon the work-life balance. You know, does it even exist? That can be a whole show on its own. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Joel Katz, CHRO at Assemble HR, Matt Burns, CHRO over at Yusk. And today's special guest, we're joined by Kyle Elliott. Kyle is a career coach, speaker, and self-proclaimed coffee addict, although we don't have a coffee with you today, Carl. So we have to... Oh, you got one. You still got one. You got one in the cup anyway. Yes. Guys, welcome to the show. How are you all, first and foremost?
Awesome.
Good morning. I'm so excited to have Kyle with us today. I brought out my very favorite mug. It says, "She believed she could, so she did." And this was given to me by my work best friend. And today there's two special things I just want to throw out there before we start. The first is one of our amazing viewers who's been with us since the start, Aldine. Today is Aldine's birthday. So wishing Aldine
amazing. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday from all of us at HR Leaders Live.
Birthday.
Do you know what's funny? I was actually going to do a post on LinkedIn and I'm still going to do it with Aldine. She is our number one fan. You know, anytime I do a post on LinkedIn, she's always the first to like, always the first to comment. I'm so happy that you guys got to connect, Jill. I had a chat with her as well last week. So yeah, happy birthday. Thanks for bringing that up.
We should make her a t-shirt.
We should have thought you spoiled it now. Oh, what I'll do, I'll just superimpose her name onto our chests and I'll do a LinkedIn I'll do a LinkedIn post. Carl, tell our listeners, for those that don't know you, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, so I'm a career coach. So really everything I do is around the goal of helping people find jobs they love. So some people just need a resume. They reach out to me, I help with that. And then they're like, okay, bye, Kyle, I have a job. Other people reach out and they need help figuring out their strengths and passions. They want help navigating the job search because it's a lot different than it was just a few years ago. So people really just reach out to me because they need help figuring out their career and often their lives, because their careers and their lives really mesh together. So they reach out to me to really just help them navigate that path. And a lot of times people think I'm there to just say, okay, here's what to do. And oftentimes I don't have those answers, but instead I have really good questions. So I'm great at asking questions and figuring out what's going on in people's careers and asking the questions that a lot of other people are too afraid to ask them or they're too afraid to ask themselves.
That's great because you're actually getting them to answer. A lot of people actually understand what it takes, so they just need someone to ask a very good question to bring that out and that information. So with your experience then, you know, we're in a completely different landscape right now when it comes to finding jobs. It's I think over the last 5 years, it's completely changed. Could you share some of the things that stand out in terms of how people can, you know, find their dream job and what's the best ways of going about doing that?
Yeah, I believe recruiters and hiring managers are just overwhelmed. They're filling a lot of positions, and for each position, they're getting a ton of applications. It's so much easier to file an application now for a job instead of walking into, okay, Denny's, how I worked there a decade ago. I applied and I walked in, I had to turn in my resume, my application. I sat down and talked to the manager. Okay, that was an hour of my day to apply for a job. And now you go online and hit easy apply for LinkedIn. And okay, submit an application. I can do 100 in an hour. Yeah. And it's so much easier to apply for a job that everyone is applying for every job. So there's hundreds of resumes people are going through. So I think it's so much more difficult for someone to stand out because there's just so much quantity out there. So I encourage people to really focus on quality in their job search. I tell people, if you are hardcore full-time job searching, apply to one job a day. And people are like, no, Kyle, I need a job. I can't just do one job a day. But if people are really focusing on quality, they're really working to stand out, they're networking networking, all of that. If you apply to one job a day, you'll have a job in no time. So I encourage people to think about how they're different from everyone else instead of the same, and not be cookie cutter, not just be like, okay, here's my template resume I found online, let me submit it. But I instead encourage people to be like, okay, what can I focus on my resume that's different? What can I do that really has me stand out and makes me really say, okay, here's how I'm fabulous and different than the other 1,000 literal applicants that applied for this job.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost become the other way around now, that technology's become so far that it's actually making it worse for people to find jobs, because it's so easy that people are just clicking. For example, the fact that you can just press one button on LinkedIn and apply for a job means that people are just applying for everything. You know, I know people that are friends of mine that just keep apply, and hope. And then you're just in this black hole of tens of thousands of people. Yeah. So how do we stand out then in this day and age, when it's so easy just to press one button and apply for a job with your CV?
Yeah, so I think that comes back to where I ask people questions instead of giving answers. So instead of saying, okay, here's what you need to do, I instead ask questions. So I ask people, okay, what is fabulous about you? What's different about you? And then let's focus on that and integrate that into your job search. So one of my clients, for example, mailed his resume to a bunch of different people and included photos with the resume that he took on a trip. It wasn't a photography position, it was an IT position, but he was getting tons of interviews from that because no one was sending their resume, or they would send it, but they wouldn't include a note or a photo from their travel adventures. So that was so different. Or someone else, they went online and they tweeted the CEO and the hiring manager. Not something you normally do, especially with a big company, and they got an interview. So just trying things that are different. But I don't want to say try this thing that's different, otherwise it's no longer different if I encourage you to do it.
Of course, everyone's going to
everyone's going to start doing it. So I encourage people to really think about what their strengths are and then integrate that into their job search. So for me, like, I love coffee. So I always reference coffee when I do stuff. So on my resume, I list drinking coffee as a key strength. And most people are like, oh my God, that has nothing to do with any of your jobs. Don't put that on your resume.
But they remember it, right?
But I do that. They remember it. Every single person remembers that when they get my resume. They're like, oh my God, you're caffeinated, Kyle. And I put that on my resume even when I was applying for jobs that weren't related to coffee, because I've never applied for a job related to coffee in the last, since I was 15 trying to work at Starbucks. They never hired me. Anywho, I encourage people to really think about, I'm still a little bitter about that. But I encourage people to really think about how they can stand out and ask those questions, like, what makes me unique and different? And instead of just hiding it, I want them to really just throw a bunch of fuel on that and really make sure it stands out.
So I have a follow-up question, and I think it's interesting, Matt. I want to hear your perspective on this, and then maybe I can talk to it also. So yeah, I see you anyway. Can't hide. So Kyle is helping people to try to differentiate themselves and try to do something that stands out and looks interesting and is fun, and it comes in. And you are, and I have been the HR leader in a large company on the other side of the table, and 1,000 resumes are coming into you or to your team. What do you notice about a resume? What are the specific things that get a resume to your desk, Matt? And when you look at a resume, what are you looking for? What are the ones that have stood out to you? What are the things that turn you off?
Can I make you a deal?
Wow.
I usually agree to the deals after I hear what they include.
Matt would be a terrible salesperson. He'd be like,
I would never.
It costs £1 million. Are you in? I'll tell you about it.
I'm all about a transparent sales process. So that's important to me. I'm just going to say, if I can rant for 30 seconds, I can answer your question in amongst the rant.
That sounds good.
I mean, awesome. Please.
I think I might. We are an epidemic right now when it comes to the hiring process on both sides of the transaction. So we've spent the better part of 3 or 4 of these shows talking about the inequity and the unfortunate experience that candidates go through in terms of applying to jobs. So we've heard the stories, we've experienced them ourselves. You apply to a job into this black hole, and even if you are overqualified for a position or certainly qualified, the chances of you hearing back are minute because, to Kyle's earlier point, every requisition seems to attract hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. And we talk a lot about companies and organizations, and we beat them up because their ATS systems are configured in a way that makes efficiency more important than the candidate experience. And we've talked about how that's a mistake. We've talked a bit about how we need to introduce humanity back into the hiring process. That also needs to extend to the applicants. So if you are literally pressing one button to apply for a job, I don't think you can expect white glove service on the other end of the transaction. Just calling that as I see it.
Sure.
Having said that, I'm not suggesting that treating people and not responding is okay. I'm just saying both ends of the transaction are doing it, and both ends of the transaction are doing this. So ultimately, we want to see change in amongst this process. We have to rehab both ends of it. So to answer your question, I haven't looked at a resume in 3.5 years. Because for me, the resume is it is a sales document. It's what you want me to see, in the same way a reference is who you want me to talk to. The most value I get through the interview process is actually sitting down and having a conversation with you. Yes, I want to know where you came from. I'm more interested in where you're going and how we can align our future with your future. So for me, I look at CVs just as a quick, I have my team kind of sift through resumes just to determine who is going to make the cut versus an interview versus who is not. And we always lean to being more inclusive than exclusive, because we know that there are non-traditional types of experience, especially in retail, that translate well to our environment. But ultimately, what I'm looking for from a candidate really are competencies and not skills. So if you are the expert in Microsoft Excel, not super interested in that experience for the majority of roles in my HR department. What I'm more interested in is the ability for you to influence the authority, which in HR is absolutely critical. How do you move your mandate forward when you don't have the ability to tell somebody, thou must do something? That's a skill that is much more difficult to grow and maintain and develop, and is, for me, infinitely more valuable than can you type 60 words per minute. So when I'm looking for candidates, I'm looking for those special qualities that translate across function, that translate across multiple different scenarios. I can teach you how to type fast. I can put you through Excel courses. Show me the competencies, and I'm willing to invest in the skills that may be a barrier for you having success.
And I would, first of all, thank you for your rant. We always like it when you rant.
Matt doesn't understand what 30 seconds means. Carry on, Jill.
Yeah, that's Matt's version of 3 seconds.
I'm going to put a timer. I'm going to put that on. I'm going to copy in Matt saying 30 seconds. I'm going to put a timer next to it, and then I'm going to hit record and just
2 minutes, 3 minutes.
When my daughter was in school, a little girl, they made her sit next to an egg timer during lunch because everyone would be with their lunch, and they would move into story time. And here is my adorable daughter just on the second half of her sandwich. And I ultimately lost my mind because I thought, let the kid eat, let the kid take her time. But I don't feel that way about you, Matt. You need an Egbert. One thing that I would add is that, and this is, I think, an honest ad as a person who has also, like Matt, led several HR teams, which is there are certain people that do have the opportunity and the time to go through the resume and look at the resume and see what stands out. By the time it comes to someone who's more senior in the department, or the HR department specifically, the kinds of questions that I would ask are very much related to relationships. And so I think it goes back to the power of networking. And I know that 5 years ago, the statistic was 80% of jobs are acquired through networking and relationships. And Kyle, you probably can talk more to this, but I actually would imagine that now that statistic is even higher. So the truth is, no one wants to say it out loud, but if there are two qualified candidates right in front of you and someone has a relationship with one of them,
100%.
That person is more likely to move forward.
Yeah.
Every time.
Let me give you some real life examples. And I'm so happy you said that, Jill, because I had 4 examples recently where I've helped place senior HR leaders. So last week I got an email, I'm not going to mention the names, but from a senior vice president over at Amazon, at Apple. And they saw a role that Apple had placed on LinkedIn. And they said to me, Chris, I've applied, I'm completely qualified. I'm doing this exact same job in Apple right now. And I've applied on LinkedIn to that role. No response. They went into that black hole with the hundreds of thousands of people in there.
A senior vice president at Apple. not getting a response on an application.
Yes. And this is real. This is real. So he dropped me an email and said, Chris, I know I can see you're connected with pretty much everyone over at Amazon in the HR world. And within an hour, I'm not even joking, I had them in conversation with the person who posted the job and an interview the week after. And it was like, and the person at Amazon was like, thank you so much. I can't believe we didn't see this. Because unless you trigger those keywords within their job application and you trigger those things that are in there, it's not going to come up. They're just going to be in there. And as I said, we're talking about, and the reason I wanted to bring it up, this is at all levels. This is entry levels and senior level roles. And I get these emails all the time from HR leaders within our community. Another example, and I know Kevin won't mind me saying this. Kevin Delaney is the Global Vice President of Learning and Development at LinkedIn. Do you know how he got his job? He messaged all of the LinkedIn people on LinkedIn and said, I want a job, because his application didn't get a response. And one person came back to him on LinkedIn. He had an interview next week with Pat Wardles, their CHRO, and had a job the month after. So it was through, you can either sit there and post your applications and hope that you're going to get a response. Even me, before deciding to start my own company, I applied for a few jobs at LinkedIn and I didn't get any responses. One thing you guys can do, if you haven't seen it, you can see the person who posted the job on LinkedIn. You can click on their profile and say, hi, I've just seen you've posted the job on LinkedIn. Here's my experience. Here's why you should hire me. Give them and then arrange a call. And I've done that with many of my colleagues and friends to help them get them jobs, rather than sending out an application and then just praying to the recruitment gods that someone's going to reply back to you, and hopefully it happens. And Jill, you're right. I think it's even more than 80%. This is why people pay recruiting companies, not for anything else, but relationships that they have with those organizations. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for that direct route into that role, rather than hoping someone replies. So I think the system's completely broken.
So Kyle, tell me how you work that into your practice, and what have you seen and learned?
Yeah, so the most common thing is people reach out to me and they've applied to hundreds of jobs that they're qualified for and they don't hear back. So they want me to work on their resume and they think the resume is the issue. And oftentimes the resume may be a portion of it, but I tell them it's only one portion. There's this pie, and a large portion of the pie is that networking. And then there's the resume, the LinkedIn, the cover letter, their interview. There's so many pieces, but such a large portion of the pie is networking. And that's why I encourage people to just apply to one job a day. So they're focusing on that quality. So they're reaching out to the person who posted the job. They're reaching out to at least 5 people on LinkedIn who work there and saying, hey, I see you work here. Do you have 20 minutes to chat about what it's like working there, about your career? And then I give people all this advice and then they don't follow it and they keep applying to a bunch of jobs because people get this anxiety saying, oh, I feel like if I'm not applying to these jobs, I'm not going to hear back. And that makes sense. But then once I have people do it, I say, you know what, your way is not working. Try my way for 1 week, just 1 week. Apply to a job a day, and for each job, reach out to 5 people at the company on LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden, they'll have like 10 coffee dates set up. And they're like, oh my God, Kyle, I'm overwhelmed with all these people. And then they start getting interviews and they're like, oh my God, it wasn't my resume. Or maybe a tad of it was my resume, but it was actually that I was being super passive. I was clicking apply and then going on to the next job. So what Matt was saying, where they're not doing anything personal and then not getting anything personal back, it makes sense. So once they put a little more effort in, they see that the people on the other side put effort in too. So that's where I come in with candidates a lot, is really helping them go through the process and putting more effort in. And putting the right effort in and working smarter instead of just applying to job after job after job after job and not getting any results.
Yeah, but this is something that's not taught to people, right? They come out of university in most cases and then just start apply. They're not, the initial reaction isn't to be, you know what, let me find out who's the actual person recruiting for the job. Let me send them a direct message. Let me give them a phone call. I've done that many times where I've literally just called the person. I've skipped the recruiter, skipped the person on LinkedIn, and I've just called the sales director. Obviously I was in sales and I was like, look, I see you put this job. You're the global sales director. Who do I need to speak to? Immediately they're going to remember me. They're going to be like, that guy, he called me, pitching me himself. You know, what are you going to go through a stack of CVs, or are you going to the guy that's calling you up, telling you why you should hire him? And I know it's scary, and I know, but I think that's what it takes. If you want your dream job, then you're going to have to go. You have to do that.
I would also. Sorry, Kyle. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say.
They're not.
Make your mind up, guys.
You want me to go?
Don't let Matt go. Go.
All right, I'm going. I was going to say, I also think there's a really big piece here that ties into culture, right? And this is where it can get a little bit dicey. There are some companies or some jobs or departments or leaders within companies that you can do that to, you can call, and it will be very, very exciting and memorable to them. The very same call to a different person at a different company on a different day might be a very big turnoff and may be perceived the wrong way. And so I really like Kyle's recommendation of reaching out to 5 people in the company or the organization, or trying to leverage your network, because it's a great way to learn about the culture and what will work and what won't work. I know that, I've seen some people try to do some wild things, to get my attention. And sometimes I think it's super and great and interesting. And I've seen some other things that have made me question whether or not they would be a great fit in the organization that I'm leading. And Matt, what are you laughing at?
I just want to hear one of those stories.
Yeah, we was all thinking the same thing there.
I just want to hear one. Like there was like a Macy's balloon or something down the street or something.
But
I've had some interesting applicants.
But at least in them doing that, Jill, they're in control of their destiny.
Exactly.
Like just hoping that you get found is not a way to do anything. You got to go out there and take it and claim it. It's like when I get new sales guys that come into the office and they think that they're going to send out some messages and people are going to start replying to them saying, please let me buy your product, right? It doesn't work that way. Some people don't like what you do and you get, 90% rejections. That's normal. And I think people have to realize that you're going to get more no's than you get yeses. That's just part of life. And not everyone's going to like the approach. Not everyone likes when I pick up the phone and try and sell them one of our events. Some people love it because they want to have a conversation. Some people prefer an email. Some people prefer a LinkedIn message. It really depends what works for the individual. So you've got to try everything.
I think you need to deploy some critical thinking. So the example you gave, Chris, was for a sales organization where if I'm a sales director and you're showing
that works. Yeah.
That makes total sense, because now I can say, here's somebody who's hungry. When I give him this job, he's going to go and do this for our business, and we're going to have great results as a extension of his effort. If I'm applying for a job in the civil service, and not going to work.
Yeah, I think you're right. Public sector, civil service wouldn't work. No, you're right. You're right. It is contextual. And also you can learn a lot about people from their LinkedIn profile. So one of the things I used to do, and this applies for, business development, also applies for trying to get a job. So I used to read people's LinkedIn profiles. At the bottom, you can see their interests. I had someone recently that I saw that loved ice hockey. I gave them a call. I was like, yeah, I played about ice hockey. I play ice hockey too. Build a relationship. And then they're like, what do you want? And then by that point, you're in. But you have to take some time to customize your, like the sniper approach, rather than the shotgun approach and to shoot everywhere. That's kind of the way you have to approach that. So I think a lot of what you can learn from sales and business development can be applied in the job search as well, and how you do it.
Hey, Kyle, what do you think is the most common mistake that you see job seekers encountering?
I think it's that shotgun approach. They just apply to all these jobs and then don't get responses. They use the same resume. So someone's applying for business development roles, account executive roles, customer success roles at IT companies, also at like an auto dealership, and then also at like a cellular company, and then also in retail, and using the same resume, the same approach, the same cover letter, doing no networking, and then confused when they don't get a response. Yeah. So a lot of the people who reach out to me are in the top 20 or 10%. Like they're really amazing, but the top 10 or 20% don't get interviews. It's the top 1% that get interviews. You have to be amazing to get an interview because there's 1,000 applications. So you may get 10 or 5 people who interview. So people just do this shotgun approach, and they're great. The people who reach out to me, they have really good self-awareness. They're like, you know what, I need help. So they're amazing people, but they're just not in that top 1% displaying themselves. So that's what I see as this mistake. They know they're amazing, but they're just not conveying that outwardly. So they just need a little polishing. And I feel like they need to slow down and really just spend more time on the right things.
What are some of the mistakes you see people making their CV within the application?
Yeah, they focus a lot on themselves and their responsibilities. But if you're a sales manager, I know what a sales manager does. I want to know more of the results. So like, were your goals $1 million and you sold 5 million? A lot of times people will be like, oh, I hit 200% of my goal. But like, what was your goal?
One sale. Got two.
Yeah. They put like a lot of unnecessary details about their day-to-day work and then forget about the results and value. So I always encourage people to be like, what would the CEO care about? So you work at Amazon. I want your resume to focus on what the CEO would care about: revenue, results, customers, all of that. Focus on that. And usually that's a great resume. Like, what would the CEO include on his report to shareholders? And that's what I want your resume to focus on, that value. And people are like, oh, I don't do anything that they would care about. I was like, yes, you do. Did you improve a process? Are you really well known for customer service? Whatever that is. And then those produce really good resumes when you think about what CEOs and shareholders would care about.
Yeah. Do people actually, Matt, Jill, question for you guys. Do you actually even read cover letters? I always found them to be a waste. No, or Jill said no, Matt said yes. So this is interesting. So you don't?
I would say, and again, I think that Matt and I probably have a little bit of a skewed perspective because we have both been running HR organizations. So there are certainly people in the organizations that I have worked with who have taken the time to read a cover letter. But by the time a resume has come to my desk,
it's already been done. Okay, it's past that process.
I personally am not reading it, but I will scan the resume. We've talked on the show before. We talked with JT about sort of the Z process. There's 6 seconds. I've read all the studies and I actually find myself doing it. I look at the name. I look across to see if there is a mission statement or something on the top they want me to know. I look down to see where they've worked, how long they've stayed, what they've accomplished. And I look along the bottom to see if there's anything that stands out to me. Unless someone says to me, oh my gosh, Jill, you have to read this cover letter, I probably don't. Matt, you said that you do.
Every time.
So that's really interesting because I've always thought that's like, you know what, imagine like Facebook, why are you asking for a cover letter? You're getting 10,000 of these applications. There's not someone sitting there reading 10,000 cover letters. So there's always something, or is there? Like, it's surely not. Like, what is it even worth it? Or is that a very outdated practice? What do you think? Because you can have a conversation. You don't need a cover letter.
You can, except that I want to see how somebody positions themselves in an employment context.
Okay.
Because communication in the roles that I hire for is absolutely essential, not only verbally, but also in written context. So I'm not reviewing every cover letter that comes in. My team does a great job in going through the earlier stages of the process and identifying a couple of key candidates that are getting down to the final stages. That's where I generally come in. And at that point in time, I will spend time going through cover letters. I won't look at resumes because at that point, I think the technical skills questions have been satisfied. I'm interested in fit. I'm interested in competencies. I'm interested in culture. And I think for me, I may place a stronger emphasis on writing just because a lot of what we do in an organization that's very decentralized is communication through writing. And we have not developed at this point in time a very robust video or audio mechanism to convey to our colleagues. So for me, writing is the primary means of communication to 1,500 people spread across 60 work sites. And therefore, I place a high premium on that. In addition, I want to see how somebody positions themselves in terms of their experiences. How somebody writes can tell you a lot about how they view themselves, their jobs, their opportunity, the world. And then I can compare that against the actual interview and see how much of that lines up.
Yes. Yeah.
It's inside voice, outside voice. If your resume or cover letter says this, and then I meet you in an interview and you say this, then I have a misalignment, and then I'm asking myself which one's the real one.
I find that happen like 8 out of 10 doesn't even match. I don't know about your experience. The amount of times I used to interview hundreds of salespeople throughout the year, and 8 out of 10, their CV and their cover letter would be completely opposite. I'm like, who are you in front of me? And sometimes it's good. Sometimes I'm like, this is the better you. I don't really want this CV. And sometimes it's going to be opposite, and they've obviously paid for someone to write it, or it's like what they think people want to hear. Or,
I'll say this with the full caveat being that I'm maybe a bit of a unique hiring manager. So please don't ever run off and do this. But for me, the cover letter is a chance to show some personality that your resume can't. Yeah. So I don't want to read a dissertation. I don't want to read a brief. What I want to read is, tell me who you are in one page and your personality. Why are you applying for this job? Why are you passionate about applying and working for us? Why should we be passionate about working with you? And give me a reason to have a coffee. Like it's one page. That's what I want to be able to get to. I don't need you to repeat your resume in a one page, essay format. I can read that myself if I choose to do that. Show me your personality.
So is that more important than the CV to you then? Sorry, Joel. Is that more, do you feel like that's more important than the CV to you?
I haven't read a resume in 3.5 years. I read every cover letter for everybody that I meet.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, I think that this is actually probably a great example. So you have two heads of HR, both of relatively large companies, and I really did not spend a lot of time reading cover letters, but did look at every single resume. And Matt's saying exactly the opposite. I would say one thing that we do agree on is for me, and Chris is going to laugh, and everyone who's ever worked on a team with me right now that's watching this video is laughing, which is grammar, spelling is so important to me.
Well, I wouldn't get a job with you then.
I know. I would send you right back. So if I see a resume and
do I need to be good at grammar to be on the phone?
It is unfortunate, but it's true. And I say it because how many other people are sitting in that seat that I was sitting in. And so if I see a resume that has a spelling error or a grammatical error, you're out. You're out, because it is, to me, I'm harsh, but it's your one chance. I know that you've spent hours and hours and hours preparing this document, and you may have even hired an expert like Kyle to help you. And you know that I'm going to spend time considering you. And if you didn't take the time to make it look like you cared, there's a message.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Especially on something that is prepared. It's not you're writing it every single time. Then of course,
it's not just a note.
It should be. Yeah. If you can't bother to pay that attention to that detail, then you're probably not going to pay much attention to detail in the actual role. So
I want to make a distinction, because I think we may be saying a couple of things that may be contradictory. So just from a perspective, let's not confuse spending the time to do something right with overthinking the problem either.
Yeah.
So please don't spend 2 weeks writing your cover letter. I promise you, I'm not going to spend 2 weeks reading it. So what you need to do is just get out of your head all the things that you think that I want to read, and just be real and tell me about yourself. And that should be, you're the expert, so that should be the easiest thing to do. But for some reason, we get this perspective in our mind where, they want to see this, or I can't, I have to kind of position myself. Don't position yourself. Just be real, just be authentic, because you as an applicant expect the same from an organization, and you probably get irritated when we apply the corporate speak to you during the application process. Extend to us the same thought process, that we're able to get to know you as an individual and see if there's a fit. I tell every applicant that I ever speak to that this is a two-way process. I'm interviewing you, you're interviewing me. I need you to be real, and I promise that I'll be real in return, so we can find a good marriage of skill sets and of values and of purpose. And if it doesn't work out, okay, that's fine. At least we find out during the process and not 6 months into it when you're dissatisfied and we're not happy with what's happening either. So I just want to be clear for those folks that are going to spend the next 4 weeks just crafting that cover letter or that resume. When Kyle says spend the time, I could not agree with you more, but spend the time networking. Spend the time researching the organization. Yeah. Spend the time focusing on the skills that you think you need, or the competencies that you need to build to be successful for your next opportunity. Please don't spend 60 hours writing a resume, because it's just not, the ROI is just not there.
Yeah. I think the networking is so key. I wish I knew what I knew now as coming out of college. I wish I knew what I knew now. I wouldn't have spent time doing that. I'd be actually messaging the people directly, messaging the companies, building my network. That would have been my time. You can control that. That's a controllable. You can control networking and message being building. How do you think that we all just came on the show together right now? Matt, I dropped you a message on LinkedIn. Same with you, Jill. We had a conversation. How did you come across Kyle, Jill?
I found him on LinkedIn, and I thought that what he was doing and the way he was doing it, quite frankly, this is a great conversation, was fresh and interesting and new, and I wanted to hear more about it. I sent him a note.
Exactly. And that's here we are. If everyone else just took that same approach that we all took to be here today, then you can, I think then it would be a lot more productive.
Well, and do it when you don't need something, because people can smell it in the water, right? Like if you network to find a job, that's not genuine. I get people every single day. I get probably 30 or 40 messages a day of people wanting to network. And then the single message, it's, hey, Matt, I love to make a connection. Can you get me a job? That's not networking. That's you asking me for a favor. So, let's be clear on what networking is. I think it's really important to network, period, so that when you actually find the time where you may need to leverage your network for a job or for an opportunity or for sales, that you have a relationship that's built and they don't feel that this networking is conditional on you giving them something in return. That's a challenge with networking, period. So I would just say you need to start that now. Whether you're job seeking today or you're planning to job seek in the future, start the networking journey today, because it's going to really, really help you understand more about organizations you're interested in, more about yourself, more about where you're weak. I mean, I often will send requests to recruiters around the world and just say, go through my LinkedIn profile, give me some feedback, just randomly. And I'm happy to extend the same courtesy in return. Let's just help each other have some success, because I don't need it today, but 3 years from now might be more important to me. And I don't want to ask you for a favor 3 years from now when I need it. I want to be able to have built a relationship where you want to help me 3 years from now.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of my friends are, very good point you made. And I think that's, we all get these messages on LinkedIn every day, right? I probably get 4 or 5 saying, Chris, can you get me a job? Chris, can you get me a job? I've just moved here. And sometimes I do it anyway, because I'm just naturally how I am. I get a lot of HR leaders that I don't know, but they know I know a lot of HR leaders. So they say, Chris, can you introduce me to these people? And I think that's what LinkedIn's about. And we all, I'm sure we've all done that. But when you have someone coming, straight for the ask, for me, it's, use the Gary Vaynerchuk jab, 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 right hook, jab, 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 add value, add value, add value, add value. And then, you can come with a right hook. And now and then I do the same thing. I post great content, post a show, post a podcast. I come with my right hook now and then and ask the leaders to buy our workshops and our products. But it doesn't start like that. It doesn't start that way, certainly not. So very important. What about interview questions, guys? While we're on the top point, Carl, what's some of the good interview, when you have your, what questions do you advise people to ask in the interview to people like Matt and Jill? What's some good ones that you come up with?
To ask, my favorite question to ask is 3 to 6 months from now, how do you know you hired the right person? How would you know that person was successful in their role? And whenever I ask that question, people love it, because it allows the interviewer to really envision that person or whoever that person is in the role, and be like, okay, here's what I want that person to be doing. And you can know as the interviewee whether that's you or not. That's and then you know what they're looking for. Yeah. And I like asking that at the beginning before the interview if possible, so you know what they're looking for, and then you can talk about that throughout the interview. So you could say, okay, you're looking for someone who's super innovative. Here's examples of when I innovated. And I don't really like that word, but if that's what the word language they use, you can talk about times you innovated. I like asking that, so you can really frame your interview around that.
I love that.
I love that question, Kyle. And one of the things that I think that helps to create in terms of the style of the interview, there are, and Matt, I'm interested in what you think about this, because I mean, I've probably interviewed in my life, oh my gosh, 5,000-10,000 people, who knows? And interviews tend to go one of 3 ways. Either it's very sort of, I ask a question and the person answers the question. And then we smile. And then I ask a question and the person answers the question, right? That's choice A. It's very sort of old school formal. Choice B is the interview just goes badly. And we could probably do an entire show on interviews gone bad, like a blooper show. And it would be funny. Right. And then the third, which you just referenced, Kyle, which I think is phenomenal, is to create a dialogue. At this point in time, we are all every day dialoguing with people all day long, whether it's on LinkedIn, through email, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram. We're all very much accustomed to being part of a rich dialogue. And so why shouldn't an interview be that as well? So if someone came in and sat down with me and engaged me with a question and allowed the interview to be more of a conversation where I would get, he would get, she would get as much from it as me, it would be a far more engaging, memorable, positive experience for me as the interviewer.
What's the worst question you guys have been asked, Matt and Jill? Or the best? Just interesting.
Well, while I'm thinking of my best answer, I will tell you about my favorite cover letter. I was in very, very early in my career. My very first HR job was I was an HR coordinator at Merrill Lynch, which is, everyone knows, a large global bank. And my job at the time was actually to read every single resume and cover letter. And I did. And I will never forget the letter that said, "Dear whoever it was, all I have ever wanted my entire career was to work at Merrill Lynch."
That is amazing. I would have posted that on LinkedIn at the time if it was.
Well, unfortunately, probably I'm not even sure if there were cell phones at the time, but that's a different story.
Merrill Lynch. That is amazing.
So I'll never ever forget that letter. I mean, needless to say, if you can't get the company's name right, I did not pass that one on. It went directly into my recycle bin.
At least it was memorable. At least he made an impression.
I made
at least,
quite an impression.
At least you stood out. What about you, Matt?
I don't really want to tell this story, but I guess I'm going to now that I've teased it. I've been propositioned in interviews before.
What do you mean by that?
I mean bartering, transaction.
I don't understand. Explain.
Do you want to be more explicit?
I think that he's saying that his interview turned into more of like a Hinge or a Bumble or
I don't know,
or a Match.com type of situation.
Oh, sorry. Now I'm with you. I read propositioned. I didn't. That wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. But
yeah, that's HR speak. Let me be more explicit since we're not in a meeting.
That's amazing.
Hit on and people offered to provide services in exchange for jobs.
Whoa.
On occasion, I have declined the offer.
Wow.
Yeah, but people. It's a strange world out there. And when you've done as many interviews as Jill and I have done, I think I'm well over 10,000. These are the one or two.
Of course. But it happen.
I've also had people who have come into interviews and within 5 minutes just started crying uncontrollably too.
I've had that. You just took that out of my mind because that was my one. I had someone come and interview and start crying. Yeah, and I was like, I was not prepared for that whatsoever. And it was heartbreaking. They really needed a job, their family. I think, his wife just had a baby. They needed a job, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh, no. I have my story. You're depressing me. I have my story. I can't. This is a true story. I did interview.
A what?
Don't say my name.
When I was interviewing Matt, I did interview a person once when I was the head of HR at a large media company who came into the interview in costume.
Amazing. What was you interviewing for? What role first? Because that's important. Because if it was a clown role, then he done well.
Please be Batman.
It was not Batman. It was actually it was I believe that the person was interviewing for an IT manager position, and he came in dressed as a Civil War soldier, and with
side?
Possibly Confederate. I don't know. He had the.
Did he look like the bad guy out of Jumanji?
And I said to him, of course, I said to him, so tell me a bit
about yourself. Tell me a bit about yourself and your background. Well, I was born in 1866 and go on, Jill. Sorry.
He said to me, deadpan, he said to me, "Have you ever slept in a barracks? Have you ever been out on a battlefield?"
Oh my God.
And
security.
And I felt the whole thing, like the first thought I had was my husband is playing a joke on me, like he hired someone. But this was not, he was legit. And he believed that by dressing like a soldier and talking to me about his reenactments on the battlefield, he was proving to me that he can manage through a war.
He went literal. He literally took that so literal to the point where he dressed up. Was like, "I'm here for transformation and change." He came. Wow. He really took that to heart. Wow. So he didn't get the job then.
I would ask him a lot of follow-up questions around his change readiness for somebody who's dressing in costumes from 200 years ago.
That is, yeah.
Well, exactly. I will say that today he is the co-host of HR Leaders Live, and he's really come along.
Oh God.
I'm still trying to grow that mustache in.
So I imagine that we're going to have to close in just a few minutes. So before we do, I would tell people do not dress in costume for interviews unless it's for a show.
Batman. Unless it's Batman.
Unless it's Batman. But I do want to ask if anyone out there who's watching has any questions for Kyle while we have him on the show. This is the moment. And while we're waiting to ask Kyle to turn it around on us, which is you are giving advice to job seekers all day, every day, so that they can make a great impression on the leader that they're interviewing with. What is the thing that we don't get that people on the interviewing side miss every time that you hear about with your clients?
What do they?
A good one.
I'll translate. What do they not like about HR directors? Go for it.
What do they not like about HR directors?
Show, Chris.
Go on, sorry.
I think something that's frustrating is people not hearing back. So they want to hear something, even if it's a template response or something when they apply. People are like, oh, I put all this effort in, I want to hear something. And I encourage people, what Matt was saying earlier, when they just hit apply and they don't put any effort in beyond that, I'm like, you put almost no effort in, so why do you expect them to put any effort in? So I don't think HR really needs to do anything, and they don't need to. However, what I think is frustrating, and I think it's actually surprising how often it happens, is people have a phone interview or an in-person interview or multiple in-person interviews and then never ever hear back.
That's terrible.
And it's strange. So I think, and I hear that like I probably get a good dozen messages a day about this saying they had an interview and they don't hear back. And I think if a candidate invests that time, they should hear something back. And I think it's frustrating for them. And then also something I've heard is people getting job offers and then not hearing back after the job offer either. And I think that's really strange too. They get offered verbally a job and then they never hear back. I don't know if it's just like weird things with the job seeker.
I know what happens, but it happens a lot in sales. So you basically offer you want multiple candidates. So you offer them all the job, and then whoever replies back, you take them, and then the others don't get replied to. I've worked in organizations where we've done that before.
That is not,
I know, but it happens.
Cool.
It happens a lot in sales companies. I think it doesn't happen anymore, but in companies when I was younger that I worked in, we would certainly, we have 7 people that really good. We'd offer them all the job, and then the first 3 that comes back, we hire them. And that was something which the HR leaders in I'm not going to mention names, obviously, that used to be a common practice in sales. So if you're talking about sales, I've actually seen that myself. And I've experienced it too. I've been offered a head of sales role in a company, offered the role, said yes, and heard nothing back. But then I actually called the person and found out why, but most people won't do that. And also, I'm assuming, Carl, that's a huge confidence killer for people to not know.
Yeah.
So then you're going to start asking yourself questions. Is it me? Did I do something wrong? And that's the worst place to be. So I always try personally to give people feedback because you want to help them. And sometimes I've had people come back 2 years later, really good. And then I've hired them that have gone away. And actually, because I think it's our duty to give them that critical feedback to help them. Otherwise, they're just going to go around and never know. So that's a really good point. Thanks. That's a good question, Joel. Thanks for asking that. So I don't have any questions from the audience. I think, as always, we said so much that we probably overwhelmed everyone. We didn't even get on to the other 3 questions. I knew we wouldn't, but I think this is a really important topic. Last thing I would say, I've noticed recently, and we spoke about this, about the video thing. I think a lot of companies now are doing the 30-second video. I've even spoke to someone recently who said that, Chris, people that go over the 30 seconds, I don't interview them, because they can't even stick to the 30-second rule of creating a video, which I think is pretty, if I ask someone to do a 30-second video and they send me a 3-minute video, then they clearly didn't get the first task. But I think that's a new way of people to reach out. I've seen a lot of people on LinkedIn post, I'm currently looking for a job, post that video on LinkedIn. And there's some of the most viral LinkedIn videos. I'm not sure if you've seen them, but they go crazy. And all of a sudden that person's hired in instant. So utilize the tools that you have around you guys. It's free. It doesn't cost anything for you to infiltrate LinkedIn and post a video, tag in the companies you want to work at, Tag in the people that you want to work at. I guarantee you will get a response. That's one of my tips that I would say, because if I was trying to look for a job tomorrow, that's exactly what I'd do. I even had someone recently, Canary Wharf is a big business district here in the UK where all the banks are based. I saw someone outside of the gates, the train underground, with a sign, literally with a sign, old school. I'm looking for a job, just graduated. You look fresh, nice suit, you know, and you're just talking to people. And I saw him in the news a week later in the newspaper, and it said he had all of these job offers from all of these different banks. So and I was just like, wow, like, because now it's gone a complete 180, and those things which were crowded in the past are now the ways of doing it. And with technology, you can reach anyone. So that's the only thing I would add to that, which I think we've covered many times before.
But that's the challenge, though, is you can reach anyone. So you have to make sure that your message cuts through all of the noise and gets to the destination.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you're just dropping a resume into an inbox that somebody manages one time a day for 30 minutes, that's not cutting through the noise. So you don't have to go down to the local tube station and hold a sign. You don't have to sing a song on a guitar and put it on LinkedIn. You don't have to do those things, but you can.
Exactly.
And they're totally free, and they work.
And it works because not everyone's doing it. It stands out. And I think you made a good point earlier, Carl. There's no point telling everyone to do the same thing, because then everyone else will go and do it. So be creative. Be willing to fail. Be willing to fail. Just try things. And, the worst thing, you've got time, you're unemployed. So, I know that sounds brutal, but, my wife's sister was looking for a job recently, and I was like, you're just sitting at home applying for jobs. Go out and do something about it. Like, it's brutal. Have you done this? Oh, that maybe doesn't work. Well, because no one's tried it before. If you're copying every single one else and everyone else, and you're looking for the same result, what do you think is going to happen? It doesn't make sense. So interesting. Well, look, before we go, Carl, tell our listeners where we can find out more about you, the work that you're doing, and how they can get in contact with you. What's the best way?
Yeah, my website is caffeinatedkyle.com, and it is really? Getting updated. So within days, it'll be brand new. So I'm excited. And then on LinkedIn, Kyle Elliott. So I'm on there all the time. I spend an unhealthy amount of time on LinkedIn talking about Starbucks and life and my roommate's cat that I hate. So you can go on there and find me as well. So yeah, those two places are good.
Amazing. I'm going to tag in Starbucks and say you have to sponsor Carl.
I have been trying.
He's been trying.
Oh, really?
However, your tip about tagging people, I tagged a bunch of executives, and then they sent me a gift card apologizing for not sponsoring me. So I kind of half got sponsored because they sent me a gift card for all my Starbucks posts. So I'm still trying. And we got not sponsored by Starbucks to trend. So it just takes time and being creative and different. So I feel like eventually they'll sponsor me. It takes time.
But I love the fact you did that. I was making a joke about it, and you're like, well, I did it. I literally have called my website.
No, I did. I tagged all their executives and it worked. They sent me a gift card.
Amazing. Well, guys, that's all for today. Jill, Matt, Carl, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great as always. I love our fun Wednesday conversations that we get to share everyone. It's always interesting. Guys, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you hit the subscribe button to be notified next time we go live. Also, leave a comment below, letting us know, what questions you have. I'm sure there's many you have after. Message us all on LinkedIn. We're all available there. And I wish you all the best until next week.
A happy Mother's Day to everyone who knows a mother, is a mother, has a mother, had a mother, or has a person you love that takes care of you. Happy Mother's Day. It's the most important day of the year.
Bye.